The echo of her laughter greeted me from down the hall. Not the stilted, courteous chuckle she offered during supper with my mother. Not the weary one she used when I told a corny joke to try and lighten the atmosphere after another tense evening. This laugh was pure, unrestrained, as if it belonged to a version of her I hadn't encountered in ages, maybe never. And it wasn't directed at me. I was standing near the ajar utility room door, clutching a pair of my socks she had conveniently misplaced behind the washing machine the prior week. She'd claimed they disappeared. I ought to have knocked. I ought to have announced myself, but I didn't. I lingered there, hushed, my heart pounding against my ribs like it was desperate to flee more than I was. Her voice drifted out from inside the room, soft and flirtatious. "You better not try to connect tonight. He's been acting strangely lately. I suspect he's onto something." A stifled male guffaw followed. "Tell him to remain in his place. He's merely a roommate with a ring." They both erupted in laughter once more. I took a step back. My heel made contact with the broom, sending it crashing to the floor. Their voices immediately ceased. I dashed to the kitchen before they could detect me. She sauntered in 2 minutes later, face flushed, telephone in hand. She didn't even inquire if I had overheard anything. That confirmed everything I needed to know. She opened the refrigerator, extracted oat milk, and poured herself a glass as if nothing was amiss. I stared at her. She averted eye contact as if I were just another blank wall. In the house, she hadn't gotten around to decorating yet. We maintained silence during supper. I couldn't bring myself to eat. She ate slowly, as if she had all the time in the world. That night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep, my eyes glued to the ceiling, feeling the burden of unspoken words. She entered late, her hair freshly brushed, donning the oversized gray tee she invariably put on when she wished to remain untouched. I reached out tentatively, not to embrace her, but merely to gauge if any connection remained between us. She recoiled and then whispered, "Please, don't come near me tonight." Just like that, without emotion, without hesitation. I turned away from her voice and, for the first time in our marriage, I actually listened. I didn't weep, I didn't shout, I didn't even stir, but I realized something had changed, not within her, but within me. And in that instant, a voice within me whispered back, "Then you will never come near me again." At sunrise, I would depart, not merely the bed, not merely the house, but also the man I had been for her, steadfast, meek, endlessly forgiving. But before I left, there was one matter I needed to address, something that would compel her to confront the truth without a single word being uttered, and it began with a note, and the reappearance of something she assumed was lost forever. I didn't sleep that night. I merely lay beside her, observing the gentle rise and fall of her back as the digital clock ticked toward dawn. Her breathing was composed, peaceful, as if she hadn't just lacerated me with 5 careless words. "Don't come near me tonight." It wasn't rejection, it was dismissal, an erasure. The silence in that room felt contrived, too pristine, too rehearsed. That's when it struck me. This wasn't the first instance she'd uttered those words. It was merely the first time I had paid attention. By 5 a.m., the sky outside was a deep charcoal gray. I moved with quiet precision. No grand gestures, no slamming drawers or irate actions, just hushed, bitter efficiency. I retrieved my duffel bag from the top of the closet, packed it with clothes, and zipped it halfway before I noticed something tucked away in the back corner behind her collection of forgotten heels and a dusty box labeled old scarves. A black velvet jewelry box, not new, not pristine. The edges were worn, slightly frayed at the corners. I didn't want to open it. I genuinely didn't. But something told me that leaving without discovering everything would haunt me more than any confrontation. I clicked it open. Inside was a silver necklace I had never seen before. A small, delicate pendant shaped like a crescent moon. Definitely not her style. I realized that sounds petty, but I knew Aurora. She favored sharp lines, minimalist, modern pieces. This was soft, romantic, almost personal. And then I noticed the receipt, not for the necklace, for a hotel room, the Bloom not even 15 minutes from our house, reserved 2 weeks prior under a name I didn't recognize, S. Madsen. The reservation was for 2 occupants, with breakfast included and late checkout. That's when my hand started shaking. I wasn't enraged, not yet, just shattered, as if all the components of my reality had come undone and I couldn't determine where they were supposed to fit anymore. She had been sleeping beside me while orchestrating weekend getaways with someone who signed their name like a stranger in a crime novel. I photographed everything: the necklace, the receipt, even the box's serial tag in case I needed it later. Evidence, not for vengeance, but for truth. Because I knew if I confronted her directly, she would lie. She had become too adept at it. She had perfected it over months. I left the box where I had discovered it. I completed my packing, left a folded note on the kitchen counter, merely 6 words: "You made your choice. I'm gone." I slipped out the door before sunrise. No keys left, no dramatic final words. I didn't even take Asher, our dog. He had been sleeping in her room for weeks. I couldn't bear the thought of dragging him into this mess. I figured I would return for him later, once she realized I wasn't merely sulking in the basement or hiding in the garage like the spineless man she likely perceived me to be. I drove to a motel on the outskirts of town, not the Bloom. That place now made my skin crawl. Mine possessed no charm, just a cheap keycard, weak coffee, and peeling wallpaper. But it was mine, and for the first time in what felt like years, I was alone without pretending I was fine. But here's where it takes a turn for the worse. That afternoon, I went back to retrieve some files from the garage that I needed for work. She wasn't supposed to be home. Her schedule was invariably the same, but her car was parked in the driveway, along with a black Jeep I didn't recognize. Windows tinted, engine off, parked too confidently in my spot. I didn't enter through the front door. Instead, I circled around the side of the house, slipped into the garage, threw the keypad, and grabbed the box of documents. That's when I heard it. Muffled voices from inside. Not the TV, not a phone call. 2 people laughing, then silence, then a thud, and then the unmistakable sound of our bedroom door closing. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. I exited through the back door as quietly as I had entered. I placed the box down near the edge of the driveway, pulled out my phone, and photographed the Jeep's license plate because, as much as it hurt, I wanted to know precisely who she was welcoming into our home and who she had been whispering to long before she ceased whispering to me. I didn't sleep in that motel room either. I lay on the firm mattress with my phone resting on my chest, the screen's glow the only light in the room. I couldn't stop staring at the photograph of the license plate. I zoomed in repeatedly, as if something new would emerge if I merely looked long enough, as if the truth would soften, but it didn't. I ran the plate through a contact I still had at the DMV, a guy named Denny I had assisted with a cybersecurity audit a year prior. He owed me a favor. I texted him the plate. 15 minutes later, he sent back a name: Silas Madsen. I froze. I recognized that name, not from her phone, not from her past, but from mine. Silas was among the 5 people I had invited to our wedding. Not a close friend, more like a work acquaintance I had bonded with over late-night deadlines and awful gas station coffee. He wasn't in any photographs because he left before the cake was cut, but he had been there. He met Aurora, shook my hand, and told me I was a lucky man. I recall thinking he appeared to be the kind of guy who couldn't commit to anything serious, constantly transitioning from job to job, woman to woman, a charming, fast-talking free agent who could persuade anyone. Apparently, he hadn't changed. I scrolled through my old emails and discovered one from 3 years prior with the subject line, "Silas is moving to town. Can I give him your number?" It was from Aurora. I never replied. I didn't think I needed to, but now I realized I had unknowingly provided him with a path right back into our lives. I sat there with clenched fists and a heart cracking in my chest. She didn't just cheat with some faceless guy. She chose someone I had once trusted, someone who stood 5 feet from me on the happiest day of my life. I didn't confront her that night. I couldn't. I needed more, needed everything. So I did something I never believed I would. I violated my own rule. I returned home the next day while she was at work, utilizing the spare key hidden beneath the loose brick in the backyard, the one she didn't realize I knew about. I wasn't there to damage anything or scream. I was there for the truth. Her laptop was open on the kitchen counter. No password. She likely assumed I would never dare touch it. She was right until now. I opened her browser. First tab, charming romantic cabins near Asheville. Second tab, gifts for men who have everything. I clicked through her messages. There were dozens exchanged between her and Silas, but one in particular made my stomach churn. Aurora, he's so clueless. I actually feel bad sometimes. Silas, don't. He doesn't make you laugh like I do. He simply exists. Aurora, you're right. I don't even flinch when I lie to him anymore. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I felt erased, as if my years of loyalty and patience had been rewritten in a matter of paragraphs. But the most devastating part wasn't what she said about me. It was what she said about them. Aurora, let's do it. Book the cabin. I'll tell him I'm going on a girls' retreat again. Silas, third time's the charm. Smirking face. They were planning a third getaway. I copied everything. Emails, messages, the receipts, screenshots. I sent it all to myself, then deleted the history as if I had never been there. The worst part, I recognized the name on the cabin rental invoice. It was under my wife's maiden name. She had already begun to transform into someone else. I was halfway out the door when I spotted it. A single photograph tucked beneath the couch cushion. One of those old Polaroids we used to take before smartphones consumed our memories. It was of us, me and Aurora, sitting in our first apartment, eating ramen on milk crates. Her in an oversized hoodie, me barefoot, holding chopsticks incorrectly. She had written on the bottom in messy black Sharpie, "Our beginning. Don't let me forget." I stared at it. She had forgotten, or perhaps she had chosen to, but I hadn't. And if she believed she was going to walk away from all of this as if it had never occurred, she was mistaken. Because I had one more move left, and it would begin with a reservation. Not for a cabin, but for supper. Somewhere public. Somewhere she wouldn't anticipate what I had in store. I reserved a table under a false name. It wasn't a 5-star establishment, nothing dramatic, just an Italian place Aurora always claimed was too sentimental. That's precisely why I chose it. It was small, quiet, the kind of place where couples sat close and whispered secrets over candlelight. I had made the reservation for 7:30, told her I wanted to talk, sent a calm message with a time and address, and ended it with, "No." Pressure, but I'll be there. She replied, "Sound serious? Are you okay?" I didn't answer. Let her wonder. She needed to feel that burden, even if only for a moment. When I arrived at the restaurant, I made sure to come early. I sat at a table near the back wall, one that provided me with a full view of the door. My hands trembled against the wine glass as I waited, my stomach in knots, rehearsing what I would say. But no speech came, no grand plan. I merely kept thinking about how many lies she had fed me, how long I had permitted her to do so, because I believed that safeguarding the relationship meant sacrificing myself. At 7:41, she entered. Aurora wore the emerald green dress she hadn't donned in over a year, the one I used to tell her brought out the gold in her eyes. Her makeup was soft, her hair curled just enough to appear accidental. She looked exactly like the version of her I remembered from the good years, only this time I recognized the performance. She scanned the restaurant, spotted me, and walked over as if she weren't nervous, but I observed it, the tightness in her smile, the way her fingers clutched her phone in her purse. "Felix," she said, sitting down slowly, You look like you haven't slept. She wasn't mistaken. I leaned in. Do you recall this place? She looked around vaguely. Didn't we come here when we signed our first lease? Yes, I said, smiling only with my mouth. We sat by the window. You spilled red wine on your blouse and blamed the waiter. She laughed. God, I had forgotten about that. No, you didn't. I looked her directly in the eye. You merely replaced it with something else. The waiter approached and inquired if we were awaiting a third guest. Aurora glanced at me. I said, No, not yet. We placed our orders. She asked why I had wanted to meet, said things had felt off lately, and attempted to play the concerned wife card. She leaned in as if she were genuinely worried, but her performance crumbled the moment I slid my phone across the table. Press play, I said. She hesitated, then complied. The screen illuminated with the messages I had found, her own words, her own emojis, her own cruelty. Her face didn't twitch, not once. She merely locked the phone and handed it back as if it were a sales report she had already reviewed. I assume you've been busy, she said softly. That's it? I asked, stunned. What do you want me to say, Felix? Her voice lowered. That I'm sorry? That it meant nothing? Because I'm not. And it didn't. I sat back, air escaping my lungs. Her words didn't stab. They dissolved something, like acid, on the last threads of denial I had been clinging to. I wanted a chance to talk like adults, I said, to give you an opportunity to say something truthful for once. She leaned forward. You want the truth? I started seeing Silas again because he made me feel alive. You always walked on eggshells. You never challenged me. You simply stayed. Even when I stopped loving you, I swallowed hard. You could have just left. She said, Honestly, I didn't think you'd notice. That struck harder than anything she had said thus far. Not that she cheated, not that she had fallen out of love, but that she thought I was too insignificant to notice. But that's when I smiled, because I had noticed, and she was about to learn just how much. Funny, I said. Silas didn't think I'd notice either. Her eyes narrowed. What? I gestured toward the entrance. Right on cue. Silas entered, casual, smirking, not a care in the world, until he saw us. He froze like a deer caught in headlights. Aurora turned to me, fury blossoming across her face. You invited him? I shrugged. I didn't need to. I merely had to park my car out front. She turned back to Silas, who now appeared pale and uncertain. I watched it all unfold, the way she glared, the way he faltered. Two people whose power only existed in the shadows. I stood, grabbed my coat, and dropped my keys on the table. House keys, garage fob, even the small brass key to the safe we once utilized for vacation cash. I'm not doing this in the dark anymore, I said. Whatever you two are, you can be it. Just don't call it love. As I walked out, I overheard Silas whisper, What did you tell him? And Aurora replied, Too little, too late. I didn't look back. I didn't need to, because for the first time in years, I wasn't the one standing still. 3 days passed. Not a word, not a text, not an email. Aurora went radio silent after that night at the restaurant, and part of me hoped that was the end. I moved into a short-term rental above a bakery. The place smelled like cinnamon in the morning and burnt dough by noon, but it was mine. No ghost of her perfume lingering in the hall, no mournful silence humming between the walls. I attempted to settle in. I genuinely did. I purchased a second-hand desk, set up my monitor. I even took Asher, our dog, back from her place, or, rather, met her on neutral ground to retrieve him. She didn't speak then either, merely handed me the leash, gave Asher a pat on the head, and walked away as if she were returning borrowed furniture. I thought I was finally done with her, until the knock came. It was late. Just after 9:00 p.m., I had just turned on the kettle when I heard it. 3 short knocks. Hesitant, familiar. My stomach sank before I even opened the door. Aurora stood in the hallway in an oversized gray hoodie, not mine, no makeup, her hair tied back as if she hadn't slept. I didn't utter a word, merely stepped aside. She entered slowly, scanning the apartment as if she expected to see someone else. She sat on the edge of the couch without asking, arms crossed as if the world had wronged her. "I need to ask you something," she said after a long pause. "Then ask," I replied, still standing. She looked at the floor. "Do you still have the documents from our joint storage unit?" I blinked. "Seriously?" She looked up, tense. "There's something I need in there. Personal. It's important." I didn't respond. I merely waited. Then she said something I wasn't prepared for. "It's about the child support papers." My chest tightened. What child support? She hesitated, and then, in the softest voice I had ever heard from her, she said, "Silas has a daughter. She's 2. He didn't tell me until last week." I sat down slowly, still not processing it. Why would that matter to you? Her lips parted. She paused for too long. "Because he thinks it might not be his." The air emptied from the room. I laughed, not out of amusement, but disbelief. "You're saying you might be pregnant?" "No," she said quickly. "This was from before one of the weekends at the cabin." I leaned back, blinking slowly. "You had a baby and gave it away." She shook her head. "No, I had a pregnancy scare, then told him it was a false alarm, but now his ex is demanding a paternity test, and he says it could be mine. He wants me to help him deny it." "You're not making any sense," I muttered. "I'm telling you because I need you to confirm that you and I weren't intimate during that time." I stood up. "You came here to ask me to clear your name for a kid that might not even be his, and definitely isn't mine." She looked up, her eyes like a cornered animal. "I'm trying to protect what's left of my life." I walked over to the door and opened it. "You came here to use me again." "No, Felix, I came here because you're the only one who won't twist this." I stared at her, my jaw clenched. "You already twisted everything." She stood slowly, pulled a folded piece of paper from her hoodie pocket, and placed it on the table. "If you ever talk to a lawyer, this says I waive any right to the house. It's yours." I didn't reach for it. I didn't thank her. "Why now?" I asked. She looked at me one last time, that same strange stillness in her face I had noticed the night she whispered. Not to come near me. "Because Silas is planning to run. He said he's done with the mess, and I think he's taking my bank account with him." She left without another word. The door clicked shut behind her. I sat there in that still, cinnamon-scented room for a long time, watching the folded paper on the table as if it might spontaneously combust. This wasn't closure. It was a storm unraveling, and somehow I had been in its center the whole time, believing I was the one being blown away. But no, they were both running now, and I was just getting started. I didn't touch the paper she had left. Not for days. I merely left it on the table like a cursed artifact, daring it to mean something. And when I finally unfolded it, her handwritten signature at the bottom, all tidy and slanted like she used to write birthday cards. It wasn't freedom, it was confirmation. Confirmation that her exit strategy had collapsed and I was just one stop along the wreckage. But something kept gnawing at me. It wasn't the house or the lies or even the insult of her showing up, begging me to pretend we were celibate when she was sneaking off to cabins and pretending they were yoga retreats. It was the way she said Silas was planning to run, as if she hadn't anticipated it, as if she thought he loved her. And that's what finally propelled me to do something I had sworn I wouldn't. I called his ex. Her name was Freya, a name I hadn't heard in years. She and Silas had been a disaster from the start. They met in Vegas, married on impulse, and divorced 8 months later after a broken rib, 2 police reports, and 1 restraining order that was mysteriously dropped. The kind of woman who would make a bonfire out of her wedding photos and then invite friends over to roast marshmallows over it. She answered on the second ring. "Felix." My name, from her mouth, felt strange, familiar in the way stepping into your childhood bedroom feels familiar after 20 years. "I need to ask you something," I said. She cut me off. Let me guess, Silas is in trouble again. I exhaled. Worse than you think. In 10 minutes, she told me more than I had learned in months. It turned out Silas had never really let go of Freya. Not emotionally, not financially. He had a pattern. Charm a woman into trusting him, talk about escaping to the woods, or the beach, or some future that never came, and then slowly bleed her dry while promising he was on the verge of making everything right. He used aliases, took out credit in other people's names, and Freya, she had never filed charges because, and here's the part that turned my blood cold, he had something on her. I asked her what that meant. She hesitated. He records things, she said flatly. Conversations, photos, some of them private. He saves everything, even stuff from years ago. He uses it when people try to expose him. That's when everything clicked. That was his power over Aurora. It wasn't just emotional, it was tactical, strategic. He had turned her into his puppet, not because he loved her, but because she was easy to control once she crossed the line. He knew about me, about our finances, about the way I never fought back, and I suddenly understood I wasn't the loser husband she lied to. I was the cover, the excuse, the insurance policy, the safe, naive place she could retreat to while things with Silas spiraled again. But that wasn't the part that broke me. It was when Freya asked, "You ever hear of that place in Vermont?" The rental cabin they had escaped to. I went still. "Yes, that cabin's in my name," she said. Silas had asked her to co-sign for it 2 years prior, said he needed a place to disconnect while he sorted out custody issues with another woman. She had done it back when she still believed his apologies. "And guess what?" she said. "There's a camera there, outside, facing the entrance. He installed it without telling me, but I got an alert a few months back when it picked up movement. Want to guess whose face walked past it?" I didn't speak. My throat was dry. "Aurora," she said twice. Freya was silent for a long moment. Then she sighed. "If you want the footage, I'll send it. I'm tired of him winning." When the video arrived in my inbox an hour later, I couldn't bring myself to watch it at first. I merely stared at the thumbnail. Aurora walking up the steps in a long red coat I had never seen before, smiling, laughing, turning to someone just out of frame. When I finally hit play, I didn't focus on her expression or Silas's shadow behind her. I focused on the date and time in the bottom corner. That was the weekend of my father's funeral. I had gone alone because Aurora said it would be too emotionally overwhelming for her to attend, said she didn't want to be a distraction. I buried my father while she played house with a con man in a borrowed cabin under another woman's name. That was the moment the pain transformed into something else. Not revenge, not anger, clarity. I no longer wanted her to suffer. I didn't even want her to comprehend what she had done. I wanted her to watch it all fall apart, and I knew precisely how to make that happen. You don't announce the end of a performance while the actors are still bowing. You let the curtain fall, then cut the lights. That was my mindset in the days that followed the video. I didn't tell anyone what I had learned, not Aurora, not Silas, not even my sister, who had been begging me to lawyer up since the first signs of betrayal. I didn't want confrontation. I wanted exposure, slow, cold, irreversible. So I crafted a plan. First, I sent a package anonymously to Aurora's HR department. Inside, a neatly organized envelope containing images of her and Silas at the Vermont cabin on the weekend of my father's funeral, paired with her messages joking about borrowing PTO to commit adultery responsibly. I didn't need to accuse her of anything. Her words, her timestamps, and her behavior filled in the blanks. Second, I filed a quiet complaint to the Financial Oversight Board that monitored Silas's newest consulting firm. He had registered the LLC utilizing someone else's address, Freya's, and the company had been funneling cash from at least 3 other women based on deposit logs Freya had tracked in a moment of fury. But the third step, that one was the most delicate. Aurora's birthday was approaching, and her best friend Clara was planning a small surprise party at a swanky rooftop bar downtown. How did I know? Because Clara and I had once been close before Aurora poisoned every friendship that didn't center around her. Clara and I still followed each other on Instagram, and when she posted a blurry boomerang of gift bags with the caption "Big Night" and "Sparkly Gold," I knew that was my window. I RSVP'd. She didn't know I was coming, and neither did Aurora. I wore a navy shirt she had once complimented back when compliments still existed in our marriage. I didn't arrive with anyone and didn't bring a gift. Just my phone and a flash drive loaded with the files that had transformed my heartbreak into a case study. The bar was dimly lit, laughter and music rising like steam from every corner. Aurora was near the bar, drink in hand, surrounded by people who only knew the surface version of her. Charming, elegant, complicated in a mysterious way. When she saw me, her expression didn't crack. Not at first, but I watched her eyes flick past me toward the exit, already calculating if she could flee. I didn't approach her. I approached Clara, smiled, hugged her, made small talk, waited until Aurora was looking right at us. And then I handed Clara the drive and said, "Can you do me a favor and play this video on the screen when the slideshow ends?" She blinked. "What is it?" "Her highlight reel," I said with a quiet smile. Minutes later, while everyone clinked glasses and the background music faded, the venue's projector illuminated with a slideshow Aurora had no doubt curated herself. Childhood photos, college memories, blurry Polaroids of beach days and brunches. Then came the cabin footage. At first, no one reacted. It looked like just a woman walking up steps in a red coat, but then the timestamp rolled in. The text flashed on screen. Her laughter played from a saved voicemail. The same one she had sent Silas with the message, "I can't stop thinking about your hands." Aurora's smile vanished. She turned to Clara, furious, but Clara had already stepped back, covering her mouth in shock. One guest muttered, "Wait, is that recent?" Another whispered, "Wasn't that when her husband's dad died?" Aurora turned to me, her face pale now. She opened her mouth, but I beat her to it. "Don't worry," I said. "This wasn't revenge. This was just honesty. The thing you always said you wanted." She slapped the drink out of my hand. It shattered. The room fell into a silence so thick it smothered the music. I looked down at the shards of glass and citrus soaking into the carpet, then back at her. She was shaking now, not from sadness, but from exposure, because Aurora wasn't afraid of what she had done. She was afraid of what it looked like now that everyone else could see it. I left before security could be called, before her excuses could gain full speed. I didn't need to hear them. Silas wasn't there. In fact, I later learned he had already departed the city 2 days prior, taking with him the contents of Aurora's joint account and a storage unit she thought he was leasing for them in case they moved in together. He disappeared, and she was left holding nothing but broken glass, public silence, and a reputation that would never fully recover. The best part, I never raised my voice, never broke a law, never sent a threat. I just held up a mirror and let her fall in love with the reflection one last time before it shattered. It has been 11 weeks since that night on the rooftop. 11 weeks since the footage rolled, since the crowd fell silent, since Aurora's carefully woven image unraveled like the hem of a cheap dress in a thunderstorm. I didn't stay to witness the aftermath, but word travels. Her job placed her on indefinite leave, and the landlord of our old house, yes, our, because I never officially removed her name, filed a complaint after she stopped making payments. I could have intervened, but I didn't. Instead, I started over, not with bitterness, not with some dramatic reset button, just slow, small steps. I kept the apartment above the bakery, renewed the lease for another year. The landlord knocked on my door one morning and handed me a tray of fresh scones with a note that read, "You're not invisible, Felix. We see you trying." I cried for the first time in months reading that, not because of the gesture, but because I believed it. I took Asher on longer walks, real ones, not the quick 5-minute do-your-business rounds I used to rush through when life felt too loud. We walked along the Riverside Trail, down unfamiliar streets, through parks I never noticed when I was too busy figuring out how to salvage a marriage that didn't want to be saved. I started therapy weekly. My therapist, a woman named Jill with silver hair and a voice that sounded like a violin string, never judged me when I said, I still feel like I failed even though I was the one left behind. She smiled and replied, No, Felix, you didn't fail. You just stopped carrying someone else's mess. Quand I wrote again, not revenge letters, not angry drafts I would never send, just small thoughts, observations, one-liners I used to jot down in the margins of receipts and napkins when I was younger, before everything I wrote became survival instructions. One night at the cafe below my apartment, I met someone. Her name is Willow. She's not flashy, not the type who commands a room. She asked if she could share my table because the place was packed. I said yes. She inquired about what I was writing, and I told her thoughts I was afraid to think out loud. She nodded as if she understood precisely what that meant. We didn't fall into each other's arms. There was no cinematic kiss in the rain, but we talked for 3 hours that night about everything from fear to childhood cereal preferences. And when she left, she didn't ask for my number. She returned the next night instead, and the next. I told her the truth. Not all of it, just enough. Enough to know I wasn't broken, just rebuilding. One Sunday morning, while we sat drinking burnt coffee and watching Asher chase a pigeon in erratic circles, she said, You seem peaceful, like someone who finally put down the weight they were never meant to carry. I smiled because I was. Aurora still hasn't reached out. Maybe she never will, and for once I'm okay with that, because I finally realized something that took me far too long to learn. She didn't ruin me. She revealed me, revealed what I had been suppressing, what I had been surviving, what I had become by shrinking myself down to fit her version of love. Now, I'm no longer waiting to be loved in return. I'm just living honestly, quietly, fully. And when people ask what happened to my marriage, I simply say, she whispered not to come near me.